Saints unafraid to go to the deepest, darkest recesses of our brain to find the NFL picks that we should be ashamed of, yet we're here telling them to you with total accountability, which is a lot of fun. I'm Chris Spags, joined today the top DFS player in the world, the guy who this website is named for, deservedly so, Alex Baker, better known to you guys as Osmo. How are you doing, Alex?
Doing great. Great to be on the show again with you guys. Nolan, filling in for Evan. Always a pleasure. Excited to talk some NFL picks with you guys.
Yeah, you cut off my official intro for Nolan, but Nolan, the creator of our From the Slot column on Osmo.com, another great look inside of how to approach a slate, really how to think about things differently. Nolan Kelly, our Canadian friend. How are you doing, Nolan?
What's going on? Is my head too big? I feel like I got a lot of comments that my head was too large and last time.
I don't think you could fix that for anybody. So I think your head is great sized. Very appropriate.
Perfect. I like it.
But yeah, we're going to take you through.
The highlight last time was you got frozen in that blue steel pose. So hopefully, right. if you do freeze up again this week, you'll get an equally awesome still frame.
Yeah, I'll try my best.
Yeah, it was the most handsome frozen face in the world. I've had a few on our streams with Eddie when he doesn't want to fix it. And
I'm just gonna throw in blue steel.
Yeah, it was good for your brand. It's usually not. So that's the one positive you got going on your first go around.
Nice.
But also, you had some good takes, and we're going to get to the bottom of those today. Let's start off with the most popular game on the slate, or maybe not the most popular, but definitely the most important from an NFL perspective, and one of the more popular games on the slate. The Rams heading into New Orleans for a game versus the Saints. There's a 57.5 team total right now. It's been hovering around 60 during the week, which would be the highest overall. We've got Gurley, who should be the highest owned guy in this game and on the slate. There's a lot to like here. There's a lot to be afraid of here. Alex, you want to give us your quick views on the game and what parts you like and don't like?
Yeah, this is definitely going to be the game of the week. I was really surprised to see that New Orleans was a favorite to start the week, but Vegas has adjusted, and now Los Angeles is a slight favorite. I think a lot of the most popular picks from this game or the popular picks from the slate are going to be from this game. And I think with the high total, the fantasy potential is huge with guys like Kamara, Gurley, Goff, Breeze, all the usual suspects. And the fact that they're playing in the same game just makes it that much more exciting.
Yeah, I agree there. Nolan, what do you think about this game so far? Anybody jumping off the page to you as somebody you're going to want or want to avoid?
I think this is the Gurley fade week. It's the one we've been waiting for. That's not going to come back to bite me at all, right? Here's like Gurley's actually like a little bit less owned than I thought he was, but the Saints have a pretty large funnel. They're 29th in offensive pass DVOA and second in run DVOA. So that could mean like that the Rams are going to obviously attack through the air. You could kind of get a little bit contrarian attacking the Rams, maybe going with like a Gurley Cup combo. Bringing it back with someone on New Orleans, or just fading Gurley and going to that Rams passing attack, which will differentiate your lineups if you want to stack this game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The Rams pass attack to me looks pretty good. And one thing that jumped out to me, and this is not something that should affect a guy like Todd Gurley, who is sort of, an elite running back, but it is noteworthy to me. Teams versus the Rams averaging just 3.1 yards on the ground. Gurley is a higher class of running back than anybody the Saints have faced this year. But I do think there's kind of a predilection to go towards the pass game for opponents of the Saints, especially when you're playing on turf in the dome. I might say that Gurley is my fade of the week later. I don't know how I'm feeling yet, but I do think the pass game has moved there. Alex, which pass catcher on the Rams would you be most inclined to go with?
So I'm really looking at the salaries here because in the past, Kupp, Cooks, and Woods have all been projected pretty similarly. Right now on DraftKings, Kupp is 6K, while Cooks is 6.7 and Woods is 7K. So I have Kupp as the best value with a B in my rankings. Cooks has a C and Woods has a D. If I'm going to be stacking this game up with Goff, I'll probably pick two of them though, because they do account for a lot of yards, and I'll probably try to fit in some value plays to get them all in there.
And one thing about Kupp too is he has the best matchup probably on the slate too, going up against PJ Williams, who's given up. He's the worst slot cover corner in the entire NFL, 76% completion percentage, and his like doubtful status throughout the week has kind of lowered his ownership. I think I saw him projected for like 7% ownership, so you can kind of get an ownership discount, you can get a really good matchup, and he's the cheapest price. So it seems like kind of a no-brainer for tournaments.
Yeah, we've got him a little higher owned on DK. We have him at about 19% right now, probably because he's the cheapest one in the group.
Must have misread that.
Yeah, so like he's at, I mean, at 6,000, it makes sense that he would pick up some more ownership. I think Brandon Cooks, if he is the lowest owned guy, like we currently have him as, we have him at 9%. Woods at 12.5%. And again, you can get all these things. If you use promo code Contrary on Awesemo.com, you can see all the ownership projections we have, which are fresh off the presses. So go check them out now. Promo code Contrary. But yeah, Cooks to me, I think, a spot coming back to New Orleans, I think is interesting to me. And, we've talked about the revenge narrative in the NFL, but Cooks is going to get enough opportunity where, I think he might play with a little more edge. And if he fights through one more tackle for Cooks, that does mean the difference between getting a touchdown and getting a 20-yard gain. So I think I like Cooks the most on the side, actually. What about on the Saints side, Alex? Which guys would you go with there?
So the one guy that's really jumping off the page for me here is Michael Thomas, because he's 7,600, which seems pretty reasonable for a guy who's going to go out and average, like 90 yards or more. And I think that Thomas is especially appealing because the receivers around him aren't as good as the Rams. So, I mean, Tre Quan Smith, he's been having a pretty good season, but he's not going to draw that many targets away from Thomas. So I think I really like going to Michael Thomas, and I have to bring up his absurd catch rate. I haven't looked it up this week. The last time I checked, it's still in the 90s. The other guy I really like is Alvin Kamara. I kind of thought Mark Ingram would take a little bit more of his workload away from him, but he's been getting 50% of the rushes about in the past few weeks. And he gets insane amounts of work out of the backfield and gives a huge discount from a guy like Todd Gurley. So I can see why we have him projected to be one of the most popular guys of the week.
Would you consider playing, and this is a strategy which did work well in GPPs last year, and I don't think it's been popular this year so far, but Kamara and Ingram together versus a matchup with a Rams D that's given up 4.7 yards per rush, which is towards the lower end of the slate. Pretty good opportunity there. Would you play Kamara and Ingram together?
I don't want to tell anyone not to do it, because I know last year there was one week where they both went out and got like 30 plus points. That's insane. But in general, you want your lineups to be correlated. And the unfortunate part about having them both in is that only one of them is on the field at a time usually. So that creates a negative correlation where that could be a good strategy for a cash game or something where you want some safety, because combined they'll see 100% of the snaps basically. But in a GPP, I'm going to just take one or the other most likely, because I want to have that variance in the number of snaps they get in addition to how well they perform on each snap.
Interesting. Nolan, what do you think about the Saints side of things?
I was going to be it's interesting because the Rams they've been susceptible to the ground and also to the deep pass as well. I think they've given up the most passes over 40 yards in the entire NFL this season. So I was kind of hoping maybe Ted Ginn would make a miraculous comeback, but I don't see that happening. So I mean, the New Orleans doesn't really have like field stretchers in that sense, except for maybe Thomas, who's obviously like they've been running the ball more since Ingram got back. So, but I think that price discount is baked into Thomas's price. So you're getting him for like 1,500 less or 1,300 less than we were at the early season. And same with Kamara's usage, they are running the ball more, but he's not seeing a downtick in usage. He's getting the same amount of touches. It's just that Ingram's stealing some of the passing work, I think. So he's also a great play, and you're getting him again at like 1,700 less than we were getting him early on in the season. For the same amount of usage. So it's a pretty good value.
Yeah, I don't mind Tre Quan Smith here. I think, as a low exposure play, he is projected for about 11% ownership right now. So I think that's a healthy amount, I would say, for Tre Quan. But I do think he's had a couple weeks in the garage. I think, they've shown the upside you can have with him. Not that I expect him to blow the roof off like he did in that one game earlier this year, but I think he's got some upside here in a matchup where they're just going to have to score a lot of points. Him or Benjamin Watson, I think, would be the pivots I would consider making here. I'm a little more confident in Tre Quan than Watson, but there's definitely something here. And I think if you go with some of the lower owned guys on the Saints side, you could up ahead of the field if things don't break the Kamara Thomas way like we're expecting right now. Let's see. Let's talk about another game with some big changes as well. The Kansas City Chiefs going into Cleveland. Cleveland's fired most of their coaching staff. They're relying on Greg Williams, who's been offered every job in the NFL, but this is the one he's going to take and ride to success, I'm sure. New offensive coordinator and Freddie Kitchens coming in, a guy who's a Bruce Arians disciple. He called one game earlier this year in the preseason, the last game of the year, or last preseason game of the year for the Browns, rather. Looked pretty good. The offense actually had their best performance in that game. It's a different situation here, but I do think he is a guy. He doesn't have a great smile like Byron Leftwich, but I do think he can get some things done today. Any interest in this game for you at all, Alex?
Absolutely. Kansas City, every week they go, they're almost always coming up in my crunches as one of the top teams. Patrick Mahomes, I think I checked, and he has 7 straight 300-yard passing games. So I don't think it's much of a stretch to project him for at least 300 yards this week versus Cleveland. And these guys are some of my highest graded in the slate, with Kelsey getting an A in value, Tyreke Hill and Kareem Hunt getting a B, and Watkins getting a C. I think with Watkins going off like he did last week, and by the way, Chris, good call.
Thank you. Thank you. It's big on him.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I had lots of Mahomes, but I had him paired with Hill and Kelsey. And I think I'm going to go back to the well this week because I'm thinking people might be a little bit more afraid to do that after his big game. Mm-hmm. So I think that makes it even more appealing to kind of go with the top performing guys.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to say I'm a Watkins whisperer, but it felt to me like one of those spots where he was due to break out. And this week I kind of feel the opposite. I think it's actually a Tyreke Hill game. The Browns have been actually really good versus the tight end this year. And again, they aren't facing Travis Kelce every week. Travis Kelce is kind of his own beast. He is a Gronk caliber tight end. They have been limiting tight ends by 50% according to DVOA, Football Outsiders key stat. So to me, I think going to Hill, people are afraid of Denzel Ward in a way, which is stupid. He's a rookie, and he's also not incredibly fast. He's stuck with some good receivers, but a lot of guys who aren't top-line speed guys. Tyreke Hill is a top-line speed guy who can get open in a variety of ways, and he's under 7% ownership right now on DraftKings according to our projections. So I think Hill is probably the guy I want to own here. The price on Watkins is tough, though. I don't know. Alex, do you find it hard to fade Watkins fully given that price and what we know of his upside now?
I don't. As I said, I have him as a C value on DraftKings. 4,900 for the third receiver on a team is pretty high. The fact that it's the best passing offense in the league is definitely a mitigating factor. But I think that you can find a lot better value on with other receivers. And if he is popular, or he has a popularity spike given his performance last week, I think that I feel even better about leaving him off my teams.
That makes sense. Nolan, what do you think about the Kansas City side in this game?
Yeah, I agree on all fronts. I think like that Tyreke Hill ownership is nothing. What is it? It's 5, 6, 7% or something. Like that's
under 7% right now.
Yeah, all he's got to do is break one, right? So yeah, I think, and people are obviously scared off about that matchup. I also like if you're game stacking here, bringing it back with Jarvis Landry, who's got the 3rd most targets in the league. The Browns were my contrarian stack last week. I'm kind of embarrassed to say it, but they were like 1% ownership. And like, that's not, I don't think it's the worst idea to like stack KC and bring it back with Cleveland. We don't really know what that Cleveland offense is going to look like, but it does seem like their offense has been pretty concentrated on Landry and Njoku for the past few weeks. So it could be something that you might want to think about at very low ownership too. I think Mayfield's like 1.5% or something. And also Kansas City's home road splits for defense are actually extremely pronounced. They're a bit of an outlier. I think they allow like 10 more points on the road or something over the past 2 years. It's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I don't mind Baker too. He's actually one of the guys in consideration to be my contrarian QB pick of the week. I think, a new OC here. I think, a guy who's probably a little more attuned, a little younger, a little more in tune to what Baker's going to be successful at. I think when you're a guy coming in, and this is how I felt about Leftwich, and I think it sort of bore out, not as much as I would have liked, but it did bear out a little bit. When you see the mistakes of the coaches ahead of you, I think it helps you learn what to do to fix things. And I think especially when you're a younger coordinator who is maybe a little smarter and comes from a good coaching tree, like the Arians coaching tree, as Kitchens does, I think you can maybe pick up some things here and learn a little more about what to do and what not to do. So I think Baker is very much in play for me. I think Landry's in play. I'm a little more intrigued by Njoku coming off of a week where he disappointed everybody. That is the spot where I'd like to own these guys coming off, it couldn't have been a worse week for him. And now he gets a matchup versus the KC team who's been really bad versus tight end, who's allowed guys to run all over them. Big athletic tight ends like Njoku have had big gains versus KC. So I think a Baker Njoku stack would be where I'd go here. Alex, any Nick Chubb for you? He's had 18% ownership in our projections. A pretty good running matchup for him, and he's getting a little more involved in the pass game. So any thoughts?
Yeah, I like Chubb a lot this week. I have him graded out as a C in projection and an A in value. At 4,500, I think he has pretty good chances to make value. And Kansas City, on average, by my calculation, gives up almost a half a yard per rush attempt more than average. So I think his prospects are pretty good. I like him in a game stack with the Kansas City passing attack because you want Cleveland to put up some good points to keep the game close so the game doesn't slow down to a crawl. And for that to happen, I think Chubb he could see a couple touchdowns. So I like that construction overall.
Yeah, I think this is a game which it has some ownership, but not at the parts which I think are going to be the most successful this week. I mean, Chubb has some, but I think there's some interesting parts here, and I would keep an eye on this game as you're making your lineups because something here is going to pop off, and it could be big. I think it could be big on the Cleveland side in a way that people aren't anticipating with ownership. Let's talk about the team who actually surprisingly has the highest total on the slate. Maybe not surprisingly given how bad Tampa Bay has looked so far this year, but the Bucs heading into Carolina. Carolina projected for 30.5 points right now. Tampa Bay's defense obviously not getting much better. They had that dead cat bounce we talked about last week, where they looked better versus the Browns and immediately went back to shit the following week. Now they're going to get Cam Newton, who's rolling. DJ Moore, who's also looking pretty good, has a good chunk of ownership on him, filling in for Torrey Smith. What exposure do you have to this game, Alex?
It's coming up the most for me on my crunches so far. I definitely think that the fact that it's the highest total on the week has something to do with that. And Tampa Bay gives up a ton of yardage, especially to passing. So Moore is the guy that's really jumping out on my crunches right now. He's only run 108 routes this year, and he's been targeted on 24 of them. So while he hasn't seen as much action, when he is on the field, he has targeted a ton. And with Torrey Smith out, I think this could be the week where he's seeing the field a little bit more, getting big targets. And I don't think the price has risen to match his new production with Torrey Smith out. So I think that he's one of the top plays of the week. And I also think that from what I've been hearing around the industry, that other people are pretty high on his chances as well. So I don't think there's going to be any sort of contrarian play there.
Yeah, it seems like our ownership definitely is saying that as well. And people notice a big game when you have a price tag that low. So he is coming off a big game, some risk there. Nolan, what do you think about the Carolina side in this matchup?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most. That's probably the best way to attack it, along with McCaffrey, who's actually lining up as in the second most routes run from the slot, and he gets MJ Stewart, who's been the worst slot corner this year in the NFL. So that's probably not a bad idea to go with him. He also has a pretty good Osmo grade. I seem to catch that. You could also bring it back with Mike Evans if you're going to stack this game. It's a bit of a tough stack though, because it seems like their offense is pretty spread out. So you might want to just kind of mix and match with Greg Olsen, Christian McCaffrey, and obviously Moore is he's only $400 more than Sutton, and he probably has the same amount of upside. He's getting rushing. He's getting like 1 or 2 rushing attempts per game as well. So he kind of ups his floor a little bit at a good price. And then I think the other viable play as well is always just to go with just naked Cam Newton and hope that his legs kind of take over the take over the matchup. He runs for a touchdown or two, and then that lowers the sort of upside of some of these other Carolina Panthers players. And if other people have them in game stacks, you can kind of get some leverage that way.
Yeah, I think there is some value there. And Alex did say last week that Cam Newton is one of the few guys he would trust as a lone unstacked guy, given his rushing upside. Do you feel that at all this week, Alex, or would you be? I assume you'd be more inclined to stack him regardless.
Yeah, I think he's an outstanding play overall. I really like McCaffrey and DJ Moore as great plays too. So that leads to a pretty handy game stack. Trouble is running back with Tampa Bay. All of their players pretty much are grading out as a C, which means I probably won't like stack their passing very much. The other thing though is Ryan Fitzpatrick is one of the best value quarterbacks on the slate. So one thing that I might do if I play cash is start Fitzpatrick just because the low price tag. I think that he has a pretty good potential to have a great value on today's slate. Tomorrow's slate.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Fitzpatrick's interesting. A guy who I was actually on last week, and he was close to going off, but didn't quite get there with how Jameis was just a debacle. But Deshaun Jackson, again, still $5K on DraftKings. Actually, he's cheaper now than he was last week. Carolina's, I think, beatable deep. They're giving up 9.1 air yards per target, which shows that they're kind of letting guys throw downfield at least a little bit more than average. And Deshaun has always been better with Ryan Fitzpatrick, including the series. Had his biggest games with Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick has been a little more attentive to him and a little more willing to air it out than Jameis has to him in particular. So I like Jackson, and I like this Carolina side too. I think there is the guys I would game stack there. OJ Howard too, I think also is worth a shout out. He's a little bit higher owned than you'd want, 11% projected ownership right now, but he is getting a pretty big boost via DVOA versus Carolina, who's been bad versus the tight end all year. So I think he's interesting. This game is a little under-owned on the Tampa Bay side and a little over-owned on the Carolina side. So there's definitely something to unearth here if you're brave. Alex, give me a contrarian spot or an under-the-radar spot, aka this is your time to talk about Alex Smith.
I saw that today, and I was like, I know he's going to be on Alex Smith.
Actually, I might have to surprise you guys a little. I'm not seeing Alex Smith come up on my crunches very much today.
Poor Alex Smith. You've left him in the dust. It's so sad.
Yeah, what can I say? I'm kind of in agreement that I like the chalk guys a lot this week. One game that I'm really interested in after seeing the ownership projections is Detroit at Minnesota. Mm-hmm. I love Minnesota's chances there, but one of my favorite players this week to roster is Kenny Galladay. I think that with Golden Tate being traded, that's going to open up a lot of targets to Marvin Jones and Galladay because TJ Jones is probably going to be filling in as the third receiver. So basically, Detroit took their top receiver out of the picture, which is going to improve the production of both Galladay and Jones a lot. I think Galladay, he's projected to be significantly lower owned than Marvin Jones. And I have for them projected like pretty similarly. I think that Galladay has been having a couple off weeks, but as a season as a whole, his numbers have been off the charts. So I'm not going to hesitate to go back to the well there and roster him again this week.
Interesting. I'm wondering if Michael Roberts' targets trickle up a little because they've shown. I mean, he had that one big game, and I know that's not the one I'm looking at, but they used him in a way they haven't used anybody. And I do feel like he's been good enough where he deserves a little bit bigger of a role. The snaps are kind of there. Any interest in Roberts at all for you, Alex?
I don't think so because Detroit's tight end situation has been pretty hard to target this year just because no one guy is seeing the field a ton. So I'm really looking for a guy to be on the field for at least 2/3 of the snaps before they're really in play. So I'm really looking at their wide receivers and not as much at the tight end position.
That makes sense. Nolan, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, I'm 100% in on Galladay as well. That price is too cheap. I didn't realize the ownership was that low. I thought for sure that it would creep up. And also he just has a better matchup of the two receivers as well. Marvin Jones generally lining up on the left side he'll match up against Xavier Rhodes for the most part. So, yeah, 100% in on Galladay. I don't know. I do think like that slot work and that third receiver is a little bit tough to figure out right now. So I'm just going to stay away from that. And then like on the other side of the ball, we haven't got there yet, but have you guys heard that it looks like Diggs might be out for tomorrow?
Yeah, and he also, there was something interesting from I think it was Scott Barrett or somebody tweeted, one of the DFS guy or fantasy football guys who works at like NFL Network, who tweets interesting stuff. Apparently, Diggs has had awful games every time he's been questionable, and even if he's played, he's had just terrible games every single time.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, that's the kind of player he is, right? Like he needs to.
Yeah. He's got to be full health so we could get the burners and get downfield.
Do you get like on the Minnesota side of the ball? Do you think that gives a target uptick to Thielen? Is that even possible? And with like the Cooks news of him getting like 10 to 15 snaps, like I'm kind of curious about Murray because he's a really good value on DK. And Detroit's giving up, even though he doesn't catch the ball a lot, Detroit's giving up the 8th most point in the league to running backs, 5th most receptions. With Diggs out and maybe like Cooks doesn't go, that's kind of Murray's kind of flying a little bit under the radar here as well, right?
Any thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, I think that Murray is a pretty good play. With Dalvin Cook, being on such a low snap count, I'm not expecting that to really detract from Murray's production a whole lot. I think it's going to crowd out guys like Mike Boone and CJ Ham that aren't really on anyone's radars to begin with. And Murray, although he isn't known for big pass catching numbers, he did see a lot of pass routes last week, which is kind of a good sign. So I don't have him as a killer projected player or anything, but he could be a nice value on a day where there aren't too many value players available.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do think if Diggs is limited at all, yeah, I guess, how can Thielen possibly get more targets? But, it is possible to see him get up to like 14, 15 targets. He's averaging 12. I think that's not crazy. I would assume maybe a little more Kyle Rudolph and, maybe Aldrick Robinson. I think if Diggs is out, I think Aldrick Robinson would be an interesting play, given the vibe that he and Kirk Cousins have shown at times when he's actually been on the field. And more reliable than Treadwell as well. But I think that could be a key injury to watch there because that'll definitely open up some value if Diggs is out. And this Detroit pass defense is very bad. They give up bonuses to every position, giving up 9.6 air yards per target. They are a defense you should be attacking every week with a pass thrower and a pass catcher, I would say. Let's see. Let's talk about Alex Smith anyway. I think he's in an interesting spot, and he jumps off. And I may play a little of him. He's not been good. He hasn't done a lot. Adrian Peterson also not projected for a lot of ownership, which I'm kind of surprised by.
That was shocking.
Yes, 8% ownership right now on DraftKings for Adrian Peterson after that monster game, going into matchup versus Atlanta, who's been really bad versus the run game as well and the pass game. But any exposure at all for you in this game, Alex?
I really am not planning to target this game a whole lot. The problem is that, my favorite pass catcher on the Redskins is Jordan Reed. And if you go deeper than that, you're seeing like Paul Richardson, Josh Jackson. These guys aren't going to get enough targets to really be fantasy relevant this week. AD, I guess I should say, he's projecting pretty well for me, but he's not coming up in my crunches very much. I'm guessing that his price has gone up a little bit, $6K on DraftKings. And I think that is just too high relative to other players for me to really consider him this week.
No Capri Bibbs either, given his discount and the assumption that he would take some of that Chris Thompson role, rather.
Yeah, Capri Bibbs, he's a decent value. I have him as a C value. So if he's the only guy that fits, I would put him in there. But I'm definitely not going to go out of my way to get him.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Nolan, what do you think about this game?
I mean, I think for tournaments, Jordan Reed is intriguing at like 3% ownership. He's got 24 targets over the last 3 games for for the Redskins. So it's definitely intriguing pivot off what looks to be like some of the chalkier tight ends like Greg Olsen and Travis Kelce. Adrian Peterson's ownership is kind of shocking. I guess like I was kind of interested in rostering him. 6K is a lot but he's also been, producing. And obviously we know about Atlanta's tendency to give up receptions to running backs. So I don't know if that like increases his value because they're more likely to throw to him, or whether or not he's just not all that involved in the passing game to begin with. So therefore he doesn't get to take advantage of that. So it's kind of a catch-22. I'm not quite sure if that ups his value or not, but certainly like worth a few roster spots, I think, in tournaments at that ownership.
Yeah, I agree there. So I'm curious about this game a little bit, and I think there are game stacks I like a little bit. I've vocalized my discontent with Alex Smith whenever he's been brought up in the past, and he's blown some cake spots before, but this is the best defensive matchup he'll have all year. So I think if he's gonna have a game, this is the week for him to have a game. Now, I agree. Like, I think Alex, all the stuff that you said is like dead on, that there isn't a target to really look at. I think Doxson's getting close enough where I'd consider him. Jordan Reed has been not that great and just not getting targeted downfield at all. I think it's possible. I will probably force a couple of game stacks and at least a couple stacks of Alex Smith and one pass catcher here, just because Atlanta's so bad. And like, have one good game, Alex Smith. I'm begging you, just one good game. It stands out so much to me, and it's going to be so low owned because everybody's going to be like, Alex Smith, we've seen it. And now is the time where Alex Smith will just do something big like an asshole and make everybody feel stupid for no reason.
The good news is at 2% ownership, you don't have to do much to be overweight on him, right?
Yes, exactly. That is always the appeal of this show in particular. Is like, it doesn't take much to get above the field. I've said that I think 1,000 times. Nolan, give me an under the radar game that we haven't talked about that you have some exposure to at some position.
Well, I'm kind of curious. There's actually like kind of low totals in this one, but I'm kind of curious about the Chargers in Seattle, about what to do with it. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Keenan Allen is coming in at really low ownership, and I think a lot of people are projecting him to kind of rebound a little bit in the second half of the season. David Moore at 3,900 makes for a nice pivot off of the chalk of Courtland Sutton. He's got 11 targets in his past 3 games. He was obviously really good in the preseason as well. Do you guys have any interest in this game? I'm not going to game stack it or anything, but I might like just pepper in some of these really low owned plays into other lineups.
What do you think, Alex?
I'm not crazy about the game. I'm not as worried about the total as the price points of all the players. So, I mean, you can get Melvin Gordon at 8,200, but you can get like Kamara for almost the same price.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah, the other guys you can get, like Doug Baldwin is my top value on Seattle. He's 5,300, which it's not like you're getting a huge deal on these guys. So if the ownership is that low, then maybe it's worth a shot. But I'm most likely not going to be trying to get the guys because I feel like I can get low-owned guys that are a little bit better values this week.
Yeah, for me, the only guy I'm really on so far is Melvin Gordon, just because, I mean, people were going nuts over him at this price a couple weeks ago. And now because he's been out and played a London game where he wasn't active and like he hasn't been on a main slate, I think, in a couple weeks now, I think people are going to overlook the fact that he's been really good this year. And I also think the Seattle defense is a little better than people realize. So it could be a need for him to get those tough short yardage passes. And he can rack up a ton of points with those as well. So I have some interest in Melvin Gordon. Doug Baldwin, I had a ton of last week, and Russell Wilson was my contrarian QB. He had a great day. Threw to everybody but Doug Baldwin for a touchdown in that game, which was real fun. But going back to Baldwin this week, I think makes some sense. I think it's a winnable matchup for him. And again, we still haven't seen that really big Wilson Baldwin connection. Again, it may never occur because it's a new coordinator and that, the same philosophies don't exist. But it could be a Baldwin week. And I think for me, having personally been aggrieved by Doug Baldwin last week, I think it is an interesting spot to go back to and maybe go run back Gordon on the other side. Alex, any other games for you that you have some exposure to? It seems like we're just riding the chalk for the most part. Let's talk about Houston-Denver because Courtland Sutton is a guy projected to be one of the highest owned on the slate. What are you doing about this game and what are you doing about Courtland Sutton, Alex?
I'm not completely sold on Sutton. I get the narrative that they traded Demaryius Thomas to kind of clear up a role for him. But the issue is that he already had been seeing a ton of usage, or not usage, I guess I should say, routes, with almost as many as Emmanuel Sanders on the season. Obviously, the production has been pretty low to this point. So taking into account the fact that he's already been on the field and hasn't been targeted, I expect him to get a little bit of an uptick with Demaryius Thomas not playing. But I don't think the potential is there for him to have a huge performance boost until I see otherwise.
What are you doing, Nolan? Any Courtland Sutton? You mentioned that you're looking for pivots, so I assume you're not super on board.
Well, what is he projected for? 25% or something?
Yeah, 27.5% right now on DraftKings.
I think like what the main reason for me to pivot off that would just be like how often these low price receivers bust. Like what was it last week or the week before? We had like
Martavis,
6 receivers in the $4,000 range, Kearse and all, and they combined for like 12 fantasy points. So like I love to pivot off these guys when they become super owned, and I think this is a great spot. He does have a pretty good matchup against Natrell Jameson, who's giving up a league worst 3 yards per route covered. So it's a bit of a scary fade in that regard, but also, I mean, for tournaments, it just seems like it's a no-brainer fade.
Yeah, I think it does make sense to fade him too. It is a nice matchup for him based on DVOA, and I do think he's been a pretty good player. I didn't realize his catch rate this year is 45%, which is very not good and not deserving of you trading one of your franchise stalwarts for years. But he has some upside and he's young, and I get the play. And look, I like playing young guys as much as anybody who because there's limitless potential. You don't know what they can do, but this doesn't seem like a great matchup to do so. I think some exposure, but I would definitely come in under the field. I would probably be closer to half the field. One guy I want to talk about because he's super low owned on the other side. Lamar Miller has had 2 straight 100-yard games, 2 straight games of over 18 carries, getting targeted a little in the pass game, going versus a Denver defense giving up 5.3 yards per rush. Any exposure to Lamar Miller, Alex, given that he's under 5% owned and pretty affordable?
I'm not as crazy about Lamar Miller this week. I've been projected to do pretty well in the run game. But the issue is that he's just not an option for them in the pass game very much. In fact, I think that his role in passing has gone down over the season. And you have Tyler Ervin, who's getting more of a role. I know that he lined up as a receiver some of the game. So I just think there's better spots elsewhere. Where you can get a cheap guy like Nick Chubb, who has a little bit more potential this week.
Yeah, I think that does make some sense. Any Lamar Miller for you, Nolan?
I actually hadn't even thought about him until you mentioned him, and as soon as you mentioned him, I was like, "Damn, that sounds like a good play." So, at that ownership rate in a tournament, it's a dart throw for sure. Denver's been susceptible to the run this year, and you never know how the game script's going to go, but I guess I don't know if the Fuller injury will change their I guess it won't change anything really, considering he's been out for most of the season. But I don't have a problem with it, that ownership.
Any Demaryius Thomas interest for either of you guys? We have another revenge game spot, the most fresh revenge one can have for just getting traded the same week, and he's very cheap and very low owned. Alex, would you play Demaryius Thomas at all?
I'm really hesitant to play wide receivers right after they're traded because it takes them a while to kind of learn the playbook, get on the field for all the snaps. But that being said, with Will Fuller out for the year now, I think there is an opportunity for him to just step right in and play most of the game. So I think he could be a pretty good GPP play, especially if he is low owned. I have him as an A value right now, so I think that $4,500 price tag is extremely low for a guy like him. And moving away from Case Keenum to Deshaun Watson should potentially increase his performance, although being lined up with Demaryius Thomas, he might not see as many targets as he's accustomed to.
Yeah, Hopkins is definitely going to suck a lot of targets away from Demaryius, and Kiki QT too has also been very popular with Watson. And actually, Nolan, here's a question for you: how do you think QT grades out in this matchup? Should in theory, if he's active, be taking a little bit more of that Will Fuller role. And there's been a bias, I think, with Watson towards him at times when he's been active and healthy. Would you play QT at all in this matchup?
I mean, he does draw Chris Harris as well, so I tend to steer away from that as well. Like, he hasn't kind of been. I mean, we haven't really seen much of him in the last few weeks, so I don't know. Like, what's his price point right now?
He's at 5,300 on DK, but under 1% ownership projected.
Oof. It's not bad for tournaments, but I as just a straight up play, I don't really love it at 5,300 coming off an injury against one of the best slot cover corners in the NFL. But
yeah, I think that's fair. Alex, I guess this is the one last question on this game. It's not a super sexy game, but I think it is important to talk about it because of the ownership on Sutton. Is there a pivot to Sutton here that you would make, which makes sense to you, that could somehow extract the value of the Denver offense without taking the chalk?
Well, the way you frame that question is interesting because I don't think there's any lock that Denver will have a significant offensive production this week.
Fair.
But a couple of guys that I might have in lineups are Emmanuel Sanders and Jeff Heuerman. I think that the price is right for those guys, and Sanders with Thomas off the field should see an uptick in his target share. So I think there's some potential there for a good fantasy performance.
Okay, that's definitely seems like a smart play there. And, I think it's one thing we've talked about before, but in general, it is not a great team total there. So you're right. This Denver offense could just completely falter, especially with increased attention going to Sanders without Thomas on the field. But, maybe there's some touchdown there. And I think Heuerman is actually an interesting play, very cheap. And the Houston defense has been one of the worst in the league against tight ends this year.
16th most red zone targets in the NFL this year as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes. Heuerman he was not on my radar at all. Heuerman couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with Heuerman, it's just all about the price. 2,600 on DraftKings. That's almost the minimum. And when you can find a guy that's guaranteed to have some work, that's pretty good.
You can roll out your Heuerman, Michael Roberts, 2 tight end sets, and then we'll start in all your DK lineups. And boy, talk about the savings. You can buy 2
That's a winner right there.
Chris, I think you just might win $1 million this week with that kind of thing.
Talk about contrarian. Michael Roberts, Jeff Heuerman, not a combination a lot of people are looking at this week. Let's see. Anything else? Actually, one interesting game, which I think we should touch on before we go, with our contrarian picks and our fades for the week. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers going into Baltimore. 2 AFC North teams, a traditional game, where you might be looking to avoid them, but there tends to be some value here and some big performances that can occur because of how those games funnel to one guy or 2 guys. Alex, anybody here who jumps out to you as being interesting? There's a lot of low-owned Steelers actually on their side.
Yeah, I didn't see a ton of this game in my crunches. I'm a little bit intrigued with the Baltimore passing stack, with Crabtree and Snead being priced pretty well. And I would probably avoid the rush game, especially with Ty Montgomery being in the mix now. It's pretty hard to see enough volume being given to one of the guys to really go there. With Pittsburgh, obviously Baltimore is a tough defensive matchup, but if the ownership is right, I think you can go there. Antonio Brown, always in play, 8,400 seems like a reasonable price. Probably not the top guy of the week, but I think that he could be a pretty nice play.
Anything for you in this game, Nolan?
Yeah, I got burned by that New Orleans Saints contrarian stack a couple weeks back against Baltimore. So I'm not going to be stacking this game, but I might choose like a few players. Like Antonio Brown has been held in check by Baltimore generally, but he's also lit them up on occasion. So that's an intriguing play in this sort of $8,000 dead zone on DK where there's not a lot of ownership. And then James Conner, just with the volume he's getting, and the price point isn't that high. Like someone made a great point. Like I was talking about fading James Conner a couple weeks back in like a tough matchup, and he was 7,400 or something like that. And would you ever fade Le'Veon Bell at 7,400 in a tough matchup? He doesn't matter. He's matchup proof. He's chalk. And James Conner's basically a replacement for Le'Veon Bell. So I think that if you're betting on volume, then James Conner's probably not the worst play. And you're probably going to get him at reduced ownership. And so I probably wouldn't game stack. I'd probably just go with the Pittsburgh road splits as well, but I might pepper in some of these plays under own.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Real quick, let's talk about defenses because there was a question from Earl about the Denver defense. And I think, defense is an important thing, especially with the prices kind of adjusting there. Chicago is the highest priced defense on the slate, going to a matchup with Buffalo with Nathan Peterman at quarterback. Alex, I guess you never want to pay up for defense for the most part. How would you approach defense this week? Because I was really finding it hard with defense from my looks before we started today.
I think that as far as matchups, that's got to be one of the best. Facing Nathan Peterman. Hasn't he thrown like 5 interceptions in a game before or something ridiculous?
He has a 12.5% interception rate thus far this year on 10 attempts per game.
Well, if you trust what you've seen on Twitter, I don't think that should have stabilized yet. But I think
that's true. He's due for some positive regression.
Yeah, even if he regresses back to like 6%, that's still incredibly high. So I also think their team total is like abysmally low. So I wouldn't argue with anyone who goes there, but I think that there's some other spots that I like too. The Ravens versus Roethlisberger. He's been known to throw a few picks in his time. Actually, the opposing defense, the Bills versus Chicago, they have had pretty good defensive performances so far. And Trubisky, although he sometimes looks like the greatest quarterback of all time, I'm not sure he's quite there yet. So I don't mind going there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense to me too. And Mitch Trubisky. I did come up with one Buffalo defense and the few lineups I did just to kind of get a feel for the slate. And you never know when Mitch Trubisky is going to throw for 5 touchdowns or when he's going to throw for 3 picks. And it's always in play with Mitch. What a thrill a minute. Nolan, any defenses see you jumping off the page?
I think there are a couple plays I like, even though I said I like the Browns as a contrarian stack. I think also the Kansas City defense is in play. One thing I like to do is the Pat Mayo defense flow chart, which is basically you take a really bad pass protection unit and you pair them up with a really good defensive line, and that kind of ticks the boxes. Kansas City has the 7th best adjusted stack rate. Cleveland has the 30th best pass protection, so that's possibly something you might consider stacking that or pairing that with Hunt. And then there was one more here. I mean, Chicago's obviously like, the best. If you can afford them, I would definitely pay up for them. But and then like there are a couple like little intriguing ones. I think like Miami probably has a pretty good chance of generating turnovers against Darnold, who's turned the ball over more than any other quarterback this year. And then Detroit with their defensive line up against the fairly porous Minnesota defensive line or offensive line, that could be a spot you might look to at reduced ownership. So there's a few little plays out there, but I obviously if you can afford Chicago, I would love to get up to it.
Yeah, I think if Chicago has Mac active, which, why even play him at this point if you're going against Buffalo? I think I'd be a little more inclined to pay for them. I paid for them last week, and I didn't feel bad about it, still, and I would feel less bad about it this week. But I would feel really good about it if Mac were playing. I think then there's at least some upside there of some sacks and some turnovers via fumbles because he's just more destructive. They're just going to not give up a ton of points and not give up a ton of yards, which is great, but probably not worth plus 4,000 on DK. Let's go with our fade of the week, and then we'll do our contrarian picks by position. Nolan, you're on the spot because you are the third chair today.
I gave it away in the first second. I'm gonna fade. I'm fading Todd Gurley. I'm doing it this week.
Oh man, so I can't pick him now then. So you're making the brave say. Give us the case in 30 seconds or less. My case is just that New Orleans is much better against the run. Obviously, he could be active in the passing game, but if this game shoots out a little bit, then it's possible. I can at least see a path where the Rams tend to opt to try to attack New Orleans through the air, and if that happens, then perhaps he doesn't meet value. I think really you're not saying like he's not going to have a good game. You're just sort of hoping that he produces at slightly below value or slightly above value, which gives you options elsewhere to spend that $9,500 or whatever his price. Yeah, I think that works. And, that was a belief that I'm carrying too. But now I'll let you take all the acidity from the public because you are the one fading Todd Gurley and I am not.
Mentioned.
Alex, who would be your fade of the week?
I'd be tempted to have said Gurley if Nolan hadn't beaten me to the punch here. I'm tempted to say Sutton, but I don't want to say any fade that I might have in my lineups. I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to fade him. this one might fit that category too, unfortunately. But I feel like right now my rankings of quarterbacks, Jared Goff is listed as our second projected ownership quarterback, and I have him ranked as probably my sixth best or fifth best quarterback in my crunches. So with that ownership and the stackability in mind, I might be under the field on him.
Okay, that does seem fair. I it's interesting because you really got to choose either the pass attack or Gurley. I just fade the Rams. Why not?
Recipe for success.
It's no way that'll bite you in the ass. No, Courtland Sutton also very tempting for me to pick as a fade a week, but I definitely will have some of him too. I'm gonna go at quarterback. I'm gonna say Cam Newton. I just think there's enough quarterback plays beneath him who are cheap. And I think people are expecting Cam to have he has to have basically I think a 40-point game for you to feel really good about paying up for him. I think if some of the guys who are you have Kirk Cousins at 6,200 going against Detroit, who we talked about being so bad. And even if he's missing Diggs, I don't care. I think he's still got enough guys to throw it to. You got Baker who could have a shot. I just think you could fade Cam and find other ways. And if he's going to be 23% owned or 22% owned like we have him right now on DraftKings, I'm cool. I'm cool giving somebody else that and at least taking maybe a significant lower stake in him. So I'll go Cam, but I don't feel great about it. What would be your contrarian QB pick for the week, Alex?
So I gotta go back to the wall with Alex Smith. I have him at 3% in my crunch over 2%. No, I'm just joking around here.
It's wow, maybe we sold you throughout the course of this hour.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go too contrarian at quarterback this week. I really like the guys that are projected for high ownership. But one guy I do have above the field, so you guys are just talking about him, Kirk Cousins. He's projected to be 6% owned. Detroit is a great matchup. I think they're going to be able to put up some resistance enough of the time to make Minnesota pass the ball. And Thielen, obviously, always top play every week. If Diggs is in, I really like his prospects too. But if he's out, I won't sweat it too much. I think that you can go to Rudolph. Maybe one of the guys that's filling in for Diggs or Murray.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Kirk Cousins was definitely a consideration for me too, so I like that pick. Nolan, what about you, contrarian QB?
Does Pat Mahomes at 10% count? That's actually lower than I thought.
Probably not.
I'm gonna go back to the well because you can't go wrong just going continually taking Cleveland Browns all the time, right? So I'm going to say this game shoots out and Baker Mayfield has to throw it a bunch and he passes for 3 touchdowns, 315 yards at $5,600. That's my
Baker is 2%. My other. These are both on my Word document as pick one of these guys. So
good. That makes me feel better about it.
I think Baker's in a great spot. And again, look, anybody who has worked under Bruce Arians, who's getting a coaching job, I am backing your ass every time. So Freddie Kitchens, you're next up. Byron Leftwich, you're okay. It's actually, you know what? Josh Rosen could have been a millionaire maker winning quarterback, by the way. He had the numbers to do it, just nobody played him except me.
Is that right? I didn't even notice that last week.
He had like 22 points, looked real fresh. Got some good fourth quarter action as well through the game-winning touchdown. I guess... Look, my actual picks are Kirk Cousins or Baker Mayfield. The one I'm giving because I don't like picking the same guy as everybody else. Alex Smith, what a guy we don't talk about a lot on this show that nobody has ever shown a lot of love for. He's a bad quarterback in this offense. So this offense is bad for him. That's clear. If you're ever going to throw for a good game, it is versus the Atlanta defense. Tampa Bay, too, they're the same defense. They're both really bad. They're both really injured. They both are just terrible versus the pass. Alex Smith and Josh Doxson would be probably the swallow the gross pill and whatever stack I would go here. But I'll go Alex Smith. Nolan, give me a running back who's contrarian.
Okay, I got one. $3,000, Bearman, Elijah McGuire, New York Jets. You guys have any interest in that? Bilal Powell's injured. He's kind of been sort of a little bit talked up in the industry, just more for season long as a stash, but he's expected to be active. Trent Cannon didn't do a lot last game. This might be a spot where he's, sees I don't know, 30% snap rate, catches 3, 4, 5 balls. It's not a bad, if you got a bunch of high price players, it's not a bad way to fit someone in at the bare min. And he's going to be like 3% ownership.
All right. Any Isaiah McGuire for you, Alex?
I think that if he steps into the role that Trent Cannon was filling in for Bilal in the last 2 weeks, he's going to be a great play. I haven't dug deep enough to really determine if that's going to be the case. So I think that could be a great contrarian play.
Who would be your running back pick, Alex?
This is one I feel goes under the radar every week for a really good reason. But for some reason, one really low-owned guy that's showing up in my lineups initially is Frank Gore. He he has a shared workload in Miami, but they're a 2.5-point favorite over the Jets. I can't say I might have him a ton, but I think the price is right if you want to go there this week at 3,500.
Okay. I think that is a play. That is a play that has some logic behind it. I mean, Gore, it could easily be a Gore or a Drake day. I think Drake's been doing a little more recently, so it does make sense to play the other side of that and go back to Gore because their touches are still pretty comparable throughout the year as well. I'm going to go with Lamar Miller. I think the reasons that Alex said before about why not to play Lamar Miller, given his lack of involvement in the pass game, does make sense. But I do think the Denver run defense is bad enough. And I think, too, they've been really committed to getting him the ball. I think in part to just keep the pressure off of Deshaun Watson. Because obviously if you're running the ball with some effectiveness, your quarterback's going to get hit a little less. So I think I would go Lamar Miller. I think if he were chalky, I would not. But under 5%, I'm all right with that. Contrarian wide receiver pick. Alex, close us out with that.
I really like Kenny Galladay. I'm not sure he's going to be especially contrarian. So I will go a little bit deeper. I'm trying to find this guy's ownership right now, but one guy that's jumping out to me is Jermaine Kearse. He's been doing terribly, which is why he's contrarian. He got 10 targets last week, 2 targets the week before that, and 10 targets 3 weeks ago. With that kind of volume, even though he hasn't been producing already, I think there is the potential for him to have a 100-yard game with a touchdown, and that's good enough to win you a GPP. So I think he could be a pretty nice contrarian play.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Nolan, how about you? Contrarian wide receiver.
Okay, I'm going with Sir Aldrick Robinson at 0.4% if Diggs is out. That's it. That's all I got. I don't have a lot of numbers. He's been effective. He's been a red zone target. He's $3,200. He's probably going to draw. I would guess he would draw Darius Slay, but if not, then he might see like 4 to 5 targets at that price. Yeah, possible touchdown upside.
I like it. I think that's a play that's proven to have some metal, and if he just gets more snaps, he could definitely do more. I'm going to go to Deshaun Jackson again. I picked him last week. He was close. I think I mentioned before, he's been better with Fitzpatrick all year. And they're going to need points again. Carolina is going to score against Tampa Bay. And I think, Fitzpatrick has shown he will throw it 40 yards in the air and hope somebody comes down with it. And that is where Deshaun Jackson excels. So Deshaun Jackson is my wide receiver. Actually, let's take a couple questions from chat real fast because we don't usually have time to do that with Evan's schedule. But there are a couple interesting ones here. Dope Heathen, any Rat Man this week, Chris? I am not on the Rat Man, but if Higgins and Callaway were ruled out, I think it's a perfectly viable Rat Man week. I will find myself on some Damian Ratley once again. Carl Marks asking, Alex, are you in Japan? That apartment looks dope.
This is actually the Osmo.com headquarters right now. They're doing some work on my apartment, so I'm hiding out here for the moment.
Yeah, Alex is at a fancy WeWork that is our HQ, technically in Chicago. So that's why we noticed that too and commented on it before we went on the air. But I guess people were just seeing like, what the hell happened to Alex? Did he upgrade his life even more? He's living in some sort of cube from the future.
He's eating sushi in a cube.
What would be your DeAndre Hopkins target projection with QT got ruled out during the show. So how would that affect your target projection for Hopkins, Alex?
I honestly I already have him projected for over 30% of the targets. I'm having trouble picturing him being even more than that, but I guess it will be. So I think there's a lot of merit to going to Hopkins or Thomas this week.
For Vibe, would you go Christian McCaffrey or Hunt on DK as a one-off? I'll ask you first, Nolan. Let both you guys answer it.
Sorry, what was the question?
Would you go McCaffrey or Hunt on DK as a one-off, not part of the stack?
Probably McCaffrey.
What about you, Alex?
McCaffrey, but just a little bit. I think they're both great plays this week.
I think Hunt's a great play, but very chalky.
Yeah, he's hitting 30% ownership, 28 something.
Yeah. I thought he would come down after kind of not getting there last week, and I'm surprised that we have him for that much. I like Hunt a little more. I think people are going to go to McCaffrey assuming he's going to get the volume, but you have actual pass catchers now for Newton who can do more stuff. I think McCaffrey will still get enough volume to be viable, but Hunt I like coming off the down game, and I think he matches up well with the Browns, so I would go Hunt. Let's see, anything else in here? Matt Barkley isn't on FanDuel, or I would pick him to come in for Peterman and have a revenge game versus the Bears. That's contrarian, Andrew. I'm with it.
That's great. Love it.
Yeah, play Matt Barkley this week. He'll be very low owned. No, don't play Matt Barkley. Don't play Nathan Peterman.
$1 with Brock Osweiler. I mean, he was starting the game though, but backing up Nathan Peterman is almost as good as getting a start.
If Nathan Peterman were the millionaire maker winning quarterback this week, actually no, what would you guys say are the odds of that occurring? It's got to be like if Earth is a simulation, that happens 1 out of every 1,000, I would say.
Yeah. He's so cheap though. Like I could picture a way, like let's say Khalil Mack is ruled out. He's what, $4,000. Maybe the Bears get up big and then, they play prevent defense. It's within the realm of possibility. 0.001.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Alex, is that in range for you?
I think Nick Mullins showed us this week that anything is possible.
I wish I had. So that's one thing, and I'll take the full mea culpa on this one. I didn't watch Nick Mullins' tape when I made my video because I made my video the night before. I'm doing now doing a showdown video for the Monday and Thursday slates. So check those out, please. But after I watched Nick Mullins' tape, I then put him in like 5 showdown lineups as my captain. He looked really good, versus 4th stringers. Nathan Peterman has never looked good in anything. So that's the one caveat I would say.
Mullins has a really cool throwing motion. It's kind of interesting. I was just like watching some of these completions, and it's like he's like, I don't even know where like his balance is. It's fascinating to watch, but I'm looking forward to watching him again. Actually,
he's the quarterback of the future. Trade Jimmy Garoppolo. It's Nick Mullins' son.
$17 million for
he was
Garoppolo.
Slinging it, man. I think that he had a bigger game than I think any Garoppolo had this year, at least like fantasy point wise, which is something.
I don't know what they're going to do with Garoppolo once he comes back.
Yeah, Mullen Mania sweeping the nation. I don't know. Thomas or Kamara for a millionaire maker flex position. Alex, you're more on the tunes of these Saints, I think.
I think they're both great plays. They're both pretty high on. Let me see what the ownership is here. Kamara is 28%. Thomas is 25%. I will I'll just say flip a coin on that one. I don't think it really makes a big difference.
I'll go with the tiebreaker in that usually, like, we see more often than not running backs are flex. I don't know if running backs as flex win the million maker. I don't know if that's indicative of like the fact that more people are using running backs as flex, but something to think about.
Yeah, I like Tre Quan a little more than Alex did. So I think not that that's going to limit Thomas in any way. So I guess I think I'd go Kamara. I just like him getting more of those cheap little 3-yard passes that end up being worth 12. And I think that gives him a little more value. Thoughts on Hunter M? We gave our thoughts on Peterson before, but I guess we'll close it out. Close it all out with Adrian Peterson. What a way to close it out. Any interest in him, Alex? You mentioned it already, but I guess give your take one more time for
Adrian Peterson is one of those guys where it's like, I ain't as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. Unfortunately for Adrian Peterson, that was last week, so I don't know if he can do it again.
Yeah, it's not a tough matchup, but 25 touches or whatever he gets. Who knows? Who knows? Nolan, you want to give your last Peterson thought before we close this?
Yeah, I think I'm in at that ownership. If that ownership doesn't get above 10%, it's a juicy matchup. He's played well this year. Washington's shown a propensity to just want to pound the ball. So I don't think it's a bad play at all.
Yeah, if my begrudging QB pick Alex Smith doesn't have the big day we've all been waiting for him on this show for the last 8 weeks, then I think Adrian Peterson is in a perfect spot to do some damage for one more week at least. And then next week you jump off, and then everybody's going to go flock to him for ownership and be like, oh yeah, Adrian Peterson's had 2 great weeks, and then he's going to do shit next week. So that's how I think it'll occur. That seems to be the way the DFS works from what I can tell. No hard data to back that up. But yeah, that's it for us this week. Make sure to throw us a like. We do appreciate that. Use the promo code Contrary on Osmo.com to subscribe. Osmo's rankings. You're also going to have an article out tomorrow, Alex, I presume?
Yes.
Yes. There'll be an article from Alex, which will help you view the slate and some of the success rates, probabilities of different guys on there. So go check that out. Promo code Contrary on Osmo.com will get you there. 1 week free of everything, all the premium content, as well as a lot of great stuff for basketball that helps out if you do the all access pass. So go check that out now on Osmo.com. And any parting words for the folks, Alex, before we say adieu?
Yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks Chris and Nolan for providing the hot takes here, and Josh, as always, for producing. Looking forward to seeing some of these contrarian players win someone $1 million tomorrow.
Yeah, here's hoping. Go Alex Smith. you bastard. We'll see you guys again next week. Thank you guys for tuning in, and good luck.